Are you already drinking?
No, Jesus, this is... Yes. Yes, I am. Welcome back, marketing nerds of the world. It's time for another episode of HAMYAW, and today, Margo and I wanted to yell at the dream. Basically, what matters more when the world has turned upside down? Is it the world that you want, or is it the way the world actually is? What needs to be driving your decisions and your business right now? Because I think there's a lot of concern around business owners, especially in the midst of the COVID crisis, which hopefully by the time we launch this, we'll be a little further out of. But I think a lot of businesses right now are worried about regressing on their road to survival. You know, they took 10 steps forwards in Q1 of 2020, and now they feel like they're taking 20 steps back because they're doing what they need to do to keep the lights on, keep the family fed, whatever it may be. And I think there's a lot of stress and self-judgment in the space because we're all being told, you should be living your dream life. You should be staying in your zone of genius. And I mean, frankly, my zone of genius doesn't always pay for groceries. So I have a few thoughts on this. But before I continue, Margo, how you feeling over there?
I'm exhausted. You know, we were having this conversation on Boxer earlier about when we talk about the dream, there's so much out there about like resistance and fighting your fears and like showing up no matter what and not relying on inspiration. And then like the pandemic happened and like that line between what is resistance and what is like a legitimately fucking impossible situation.
Oh my God, yes.
Where you have to be like, right now, I'm not afraid. Like, all I want to do is do HAMYAW and work. But like, in 30 minutes, a tiny human's going to walk out of that room and she's going to scream right at that camera.
Oh, McDonald's! Yes.
Which technically is on brand. But how are you doing? Like, we're all doing bad. Yeah. And you just have to, you're kind of doing the best you can. I love what you just said, though, about open eyes. Like, I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to lie to y'all, which is... Yeah. What I actually think is a little bit the silver lining here is you can't lie anymore, guys.
Challenge accepted to some people in the space. But what's interesting too is that I think the guilt is compiling because some people are like, well, I just had my best launch ever. We had our most amazing numbers. Yeah. And everyone's like, oh shit, like what am I not doing?
Yeah.
Basically, like the secure businesses right now are, if you're in the business of making people more money, you're going to be fine. If you're in the business of teaching people how to sell things, you're going to be fine. But if you're, you know, those smaller niche businesses, the creative businesses have taken a big hit because even though they are wildly necessary for a huge number of reasons that we know, marketing and advertising is the first thing to get the X. It's just the way life is. And
well, it depends. It depends. Like, I don't even think marketing and advertising are what's suffering. I think it's like physically. I know photographers where they're happy to spend on marketing, but like they can't
there's no money. Exactly. Well, that's the point. Like you can't spend on marketing and advertising if there's no money in these businesses. Yeah. There's a lot of self-judgment now too, because I know for me, I've been moving out of the copywriting space for, you know, the last year now. And I've shared some of the journey with you guys. And yeah, exactly. I'm moving into more coaching and creative direction, which has been awesome. And those things are still selling. But I think a big moment for me was when I got offered copywriting contracts and they came up to about, you know, a really solid lump sum of cash. And I was like, do I do this? And in the back of my head, like life coach Hillary was like, stay in the zone of genius. Like, don't do this. And the logical brain was like, yeah, let's be secure for now. I chose to prioritize that security. Yeah. I had a lot of shame around doing that because I think like we have misbranded sometimes making the right move for an untenable situation as resistance and as coming up with excuses. When in reality, nobody's been through this. Nobody who's alive, except I guess some people who were alive in the pandemic of 1918, nobody alive has been through this. So we're trying to sort of find our way. And I think, especially for business owners, like there's that guilt around regressing. There's that guilt around like, okay, I want to be doing this high level work, but execution and deliverables are more valued right now. That's part of listening to the market as well. But also there's another huge sort of, God, I don't want to call offspring a fly in the ointment, but the other huge issue is that you Sorry, I was like, ugh, can you tell I'm childless? But I know there's also been a huge challenge for entrepreneurs who have kids at home. And it's even more of an untenable situation than not as many clients as there used to be for these high level offers. Like you physically cannot keep up with your working style when you still have daycare and nurses.
There's something actually that you just said that I feel like we need to call out here is that I don't want us rank ordering who has it worse. And I don't mean just you and me. I mean, like, I hear so many people qualify what they say to me sometimes where they're like, oh, I know, like, cause I can tell they think that I'm in a really bad situation. I am, but but it doesn't discount their situation. Like all of us are in hard stuff. Like, I don't care if you have no kids. I don't care if you have 14 kids. I don't care if you have a sick parent or back pain or like, it is a really stressful time. So there's that like mental load that's impacting all of us right now. And then on top of that, there's this question of what the frick is the market doing? Because part of what we pride ourselves on is that ability to sort of spot the trends in the market and then fill those needs and find those opportunities. We talked about adaptation. It's a really hard thing to suddenly think about how to adapt when you don't know what the changes are going to be. Or if you're like me, you suddenly go down those existential crises of like, what was I building? Like, should I still be building it? Who am I? What even is truth? There are some companies that like sincerely are drowning in business and can't actually fulfill it. There are some people where demand has simply dried up and there's nothing you can do. And then there's people in my situation where all I want to do is freaking work, but I have become a 24/7 daycare, 13 hours a day with a toddler in a tiny apartment. And so
otherwise known as a mom. Sorry.
That is one thing I will caveat here because I've heard a lot of people say like, this is setting the women's movement back because all of this is falling on women and this is so terrible. And I'm like, hold the phone. I actually think it's setting us forward because all of a sudden everyone is valuing the domestic sphere where they're like, shit, I have to clean my own house now. Shit, I have to raise my children. Shit. You know, like all of these things that it was like, we will pay for them. They will get done because someone else does my groceries. Not anymore because you can't do that. No one can get into your house now because we got a distance. It's kind of like everyone who says now that teachers should be paid so much more. Like, yes. Like you suddenly figured this out. This has been a thing for I would be so offended if I was a teacher right now. I'd be like, oh my God, screw all of you. We have been telling you this is important. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, so I think I am in a different category. I feel like in terms of like what's happening with business because I can't actually focus on business at all. I think we're all having these conversations though about like, what are the essential things? Like what actually needs to get done? So I have had to shut down a few things because I couldn't implement them and like had to be really honest with myself about what my bandwidth was and what I could take on. So the first few weeks I was like, hustle, I will not sleep. I'm like silent. And then all of a sudden my husband was like, you're crashing. And I was like, I do not crash. And then I crashed. And then
same. My husband was also like, you're going to be a sad pancake. Careful. And I was like, no, I have so much energy with all the panic going through my system. I hear you. You hit a wall.
It's totally true. So, you know, I think we have to take realistic assessments, exactly what you said. There's what we want, and then there's reality. And then there's also what we fear on the other end of that spectrum. So I think finding a way to live in the reality. So for me, that's going, okay, so reasonably, you spend 13 hours a day with a toddler. You can use 3 hours of television before she starts screaming. And that's throughout the day. Then you have nap time. And even then, basically I spend all day cooking meals and cleaning them up. And like, I'm not even kidding. But like the reason I share that kind of like level of detail is that these are things that I would have normally dismissed as like, oh, admin, not important. And when you're doing like, if this is going to be months and months and months, there's limited brain bandwidth. So I have to look at my business and go, okay, so I have been building a platform that's really important to me. My writing is the most important piece to me. I've been piloting a new course. Like there's certain things where I've had to just hit pause and trust that we've built enough equity that when we turn the lights back on, it'll be fine because mine's not really a question of demand. It's a question of fulfillment. But there's also a question of like, how do you judge yourself? Because I really feel like shit, you know, like there are moments where you're just like, oh, what does this mean for who I am now?
And that's the thing too. And I think this is, if Hillary and Margo want to yell at the dream, I also want to define what dream we're talking about. And I think in the online business space, particularly, there's this idea that in order to be truly successful, you should be doing only the things that are in your zone of genius, letting your team handle the rest, charging your clients absolute top dollar so that you can, work less and make more money, and that you should not regress. And if you ever have an opportunity to make money that's in line with something you're letting go of, that you need to say no. And I think that makes sense in every other circumstance except the one we're in. And I don't know, wartime, I guess. But I think where so many people are experiencing that guilt is that is what so many of us have our eyes locked on. Imagine a business where I only did what I wanted, when I wanted, and made a bunch of money doing it. And in reality, there are very few of those businesses that
that's
actually
not a thing. That's what I mean.
There's some people who get close, but they also have hugely sprawling teams, enormous overhead, so they're not having the easiest time right now either. There's a lot of guilt because we feel like if we regress, if we sort of bow to our circumstances, that something is wrong and that we are backsliding. And even the guilt, I can't believe you have guilt around this as well, because of course you need to pause things for a second.
Yeah.
You have a family to take care of. For me, I had to make sure the rent paid, and we have to make sure that things are going to keep moving forward, and that, I have a team to take care of as well. And I think it's really, really difficult when we are holding ourselves to this impossible standard. And I've been seeing a lot of people preaching that you need to stay in that space regardless. And I'm not saying panic and throw a bunch of random $47 offers at the wall and pray. I just think that doing what you need to do to make sure you can make it through this crisis, whatever you need to do is fine.
Yes.
Give yourself that permission. Yes. You are figuring this out. It's not always going to be that way. You can continue on your journey when this shifts and when you see the opportunity. And the third piece of this as well, I don't know if I've been counting, but the other piece too is that it creates this feeling like this crisis has taken something from you.
Yeah.
And that makes it even worse. It has stolen something from you. And I know I had that feeling when everything started hitting, because I was like, I'm reaching this revenue goal. It's consistent. Yeah. It's fucking awesome. I'm really proud of me and my team. We're doing this. I'm getting where I want to be. And then all of a sudden, the entire global economy grinds to a halt. No, and it's just really a question of, what do I owe? I don't know. This virus doesn't owe us anything, right? But in terms of pursuing our dream, what if that goes from being as straight as you can line and into a place with detours? Is that a bad thing? Is that something we should be ashamed of? And no, but we all feel it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a good question, even pre-pandemic, which is if it's a pivot in your business, or if it is a direction that's suddenly working, or a new product or service or something you're rolling out, where I mean, in the example that Hillary and I use, it's letting go of copywriting and then having to, quote, go back to it. I actually think that that's a sign something's right. What I heard when you described the dream, because you said it accurately, but it was the thing that I hear when so many people describe this passive income, sitting on the beach, only do work that lights you up and makes you better, and indulge in lots of self-care. Well, first of all, I hear a fuck ton of privilege, but I also hear this feeling that you're better than something. That's the stuff that was bullshit before, and it's especially bullshit now, because this is what's going to make or break. You guys are going to watch everyone drop out who wasn't legit. Now, there's going to be some very legit people who drop out too, because there's going to be circumstances out of our control. I think we have to stop thinking about optics for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And
how dare you?
I know, sorry. Truthfully, there are some businesses that fail and it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And then there are some businesses that fail and it's totally your fault. Both of those things are true. But either way, if you want staying power here, do not ever believe that you're better than anything. I've been making a list of things that I could do. If we really had to make money all of a sudden on a dime, I can waitress, I can VA, I'd be a damn good VA. I know what I like to pay for my VAs. You know what I mean? But I think if you ever think that you're above certain types of work or beyond it, that to me is the dangerous part of the narrative of the dream, because there is an empowering place where you're you shouldn't be doing that kind of work anymore. And that's especially true with women. Yeah. There is a point where it's no, you shouldn't be doing that kind of work anymore.
Yeah.
But finding that line where right now, maybe you need to.
Yeah.
Maybe you do need to. And it's confusing. I don't think I cleaned this up with a nice bow for y'all, but simply to say that I think if you are going to have any staying power, you cannot believe you're better than anything.
Yeah. And I think it's also let's put optics on the shelf for the duration. Let's put shame on the shelf for the duration. You've got to do what you've got to do right now. And that's the difficult thing. And also I think when we're talking about the dream in this business, it kind of the undercurrent to it is these people are I don't really want to work anymore.
Right.
Like that's
Right.
kind of like,
That's
I don't want to do the
Yeah.
hard stuff anymore, which is fine. I would love to not do the hard stuff. And I am shameless in my pursuit of doing less hard stuff and letting other people do it for me. But I think it's the shame and the self-judgment, feeling like we are regressing when adapting doesn't always look like a new offer. Adapting doesn't always look like optics. Adapting means having the internal conversation with yourself that you're not regressing. This is temporary. You're doing what you need to do to, survive, but also have stability. And that opportunity is, feels like it's shrinking away from us.
Yeah.
And I think whatever you do to pursue that and feel secure and take care of yourself and your family, do it. If someone judges you for it, set their house on fire.
That's
no,
right.
I'm just kidding.
Burn it down. Retrospect. There's certain things I feel shame about now, but like in a year or two, when I tell the story, like I'm going to sound awesome. You know
Exactly.
what I mean?
Fodder for the memoirs, baby.
All your commencement speech.
Yep. You're going to hear COVID stories at the top of every TED Talk for the next decade. I hope you're ready. It's like the stories everyone had where it's like, and I did this, and then I lost everything in the 2008 recession. And it's going to be like that. And then I lost everything in the COVID crisis. Now I make $10 billion and live the dream, baby. But and I never do work.
I'm reminded, I have a friend, this was years ago, but he had a startup that was struggling. I mean, like it was getting its legs, but it takes a while because they had a lot of software to build and they were testing different markets and they were finally figuring things out. And he didn't want to take on more investors. And his big thing was, I need to pay my people. I need to pay my people. I don't care about anything else. He took a wait staff job in Manhattan. Granted, he didn't have children, but still he would work nights. So like 6 to midnight. And with tips, managed to cover his staff salary. Well, it's, a nice swanky place.
I was like, where was he working?
Where like every meal is about $300 to $700,
Holy shit.
But that's my point is like, this is the time for creativity. This is the time to humble yourself. Can you imagine if he cared about optics, if you wanted to win the bro table and he had to sit there, like the cool thing to say is like, oh, we're going after Series B and we talked to Andreessen and we did this and we were just covered in whatever Wired magazine or whatever. I don't know, whatever the bros say. And instead he humbled himself. He's like, no, I got a waitstaff job and I got covered. That's $60,000 he managed to like cover without having to take on more investors. It's a great story now, but you imagine the shame he must have felt. Like he definitely had people come in that he knew, right? Like that happened. I'm certain that happened. I think there's a lot of humble pie that we're going to have to eat right now. Who knows? Hillary and I might be coming at you from jobs next month.
Can't wait to tell you my COVID story on the TED stage.
I was having a conversation with a bunch of moms who felt this pressure to push through a lot of their exhaustion and pain and like neglect their children. And they were like, because they saw so many other parents like killing it. And I was like, what does killing it mean? Listen, you're always going to judge your business by its revenue because it's a business. Like you need profit to be a business. Otherwise you're something else. So that's fair. That's a fair metric, but you have to consider these things in context. These are not all equal. And so if right now you're in the middle of a crisis, you have children at home, you have a sick loved one, or you're simply freaking stressed or depressed or all of the million other things that are truly affecting you. You can't go outside. Like things suck right now. Like let's take a moment to redefine how you measure success for yourself. Did you put on pants? You're killing it. Is your kid alive and not dead? Like is...
Let's sing things. Keep dancing.
No, but really,
did you eat today something besides fast food?
Yes. Did you not eat the whole stress baked cake? Just a piece of it, Or maybe you ate the whole thing and then you feel no shame either. Good
You're
on
killing
you.
It.
Let's just redefine killing it for a little bit here and maybe
just
longer term. But really, I think it's a good moment to evaluate what success looks like for us because a lot of us, obviously the pursuit was part of the pleasure and that pursuit has now pivoted. So I like to think about it in terms of writing. That's always the metaphor that works for me because it is how I think about life. I pretty much only have bad writing days. I prefer my worst writing day over my good anything else. And that's how I know I have to stay in writing. So as you're thinking about like business and what you're doing here and what you're creating, like it's not going to be pleasant. It doesn't have to be pleasant. Like the dream that they have been selling you about what this looks like, what is existing in your life is reality, right? Like you're going to get better eventually, but it's a marathon. It's going to be a 20-year sprint. Wow, words.
Hopefully
Marathon
not
sprint.
that long. 20 years sprint.
I don't mean for COVID. I mean for business. I meant like,
Usain Bolt.
like,
we're in it for the long haul. I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Part of sustainability is knowing when to rest.
Yeah.
Part of,
Yeah.
making it through the finish line is understanding how to pace yourself, and that you don't necessarily have to be killing it all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when outside circumstances are kind of rocking your face. One thing I do want to say, and this I think goes for a lot of entrepreneurs, and I would challenge you guys to have this conversation with yourselves, because I had this conversation with myself a couple of years ago when I kept burning out, is that it's important to have places you get fulfillment in life that are not your work and financial success. There's so much more to life, even though this is a really fun part of it. So keep that in mind. I think if you're judging yourself hard, if you feel like you're a failure for these reasons, there are a million things that can bring you fulfillment.
I really love this, because I think that as we think about the dream, part of a corollary to this like manufactured dream is this obsession with singular focus and productivity and output. And it just doesn't acknowledge the reality of you are a multifaceted person.
Yeah.
And there are parts of your life that shouldn't actually be productive. Like, you should have fun. Do you remember hanging out? Like, do you remember when that was a thing? I'm not just even talking about
sure? I think it's like a myth.
I'm talking about like pre-business, when you were
Yeah.
like, hey, do you want to come over and have some beers and watch bad television and we won't talk about anything important? Like, I can't remember the last time I did something that wasn't productive. And I think that like we need that in our lives. Here's why. Not because it's going to get you ahead, because you're a fucking human being. You need lots of things for no good reason, just because you're human. And so let's not forget our humanity. And as we encounter this marathon that's coming up, let's have a little more compassion for ourselves. Let's shift the dream. And I really want you to put your reality goggles on, like Hillary said, and think about what is in front of you, the reality of the situation, before you judge your behavior in it and what you wanted and what could have been. Like, you can mourn all of that, but find a way to adapt to what's here and not judge yourself. Just keep making it work. You are not better than anything. What's going to be better in the long run is humbling yourself to what needs to get done.
Yep.
And doing it.
Amen.
All right. Well, we want to hear from you all. How are things going with the dream? What realities are you waking up to? What did you believe was true pre-COVID and are realizing was like not really what you wanted, or even a reality? What are you having to let go of for this year? Tell us all the things in the comments. If you liked this episode, please like it below, subscribe to our channel, and leave a note. I am Margo Aaron.
And I'm Hillary Weiss.
This has been HAMYAW, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye for now, guys.
Bye.